Welcome back to Rerouted, where we explore unique career paths to give you the tools you need to create the life you want. On today's episode, I talk with Peter Durand, director of the visual facilitation firm Alphachimp. We talk about Peter's entry into the world of graphic facilitation, the highs and lows of leading a creative firm, Peter's work as an adjunct law professor at Northwestern University, disruption of AI in creative industries, and dealing with imposter syndrome. Let's get into it. Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Wonderful to be here, Nick.
I want to start off, actually, I'm very curious. Are those paintings behind you yours, or did you buy them? What's the story with those?
They are a cluttered mix of paintings from my sordid past, except for this one,
Okay.
the monkey or the chimp or whatever that is. I was bought for $1 off of eBay plus $16 shipping. So that my company's called Alphachimp, so I claim that that is our founder.
Very nice, very nice. I like that.
But
All right.
everything else, these are all different paintings from different eras of my life.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's start talking about that life then. How about that? Let's hop right into it. Can you tell me a little bit about your educational background?
I grew up in Tennessee, in East Tennessee, but I was born in Kenya, in Nairobi, in East Africa. And the reason I start there when you ask about my education is my parents were very supportive of my whole weird educational path because when they met, my father had been, they were both Americans, white Americans. My father had been to university, he went to Yale. He graduated in the mid 50s, didn't know what he wanted to do, so he went into the Marine Corps, was in the Marine Corps for a couple of years, got out, didn't know what he wanted to do, so he went to law school, for a couple of years, got out, didn't know what he wanted to do, worked as a lawyer, a junior lawyer for a year, got really bored and joined this weird thing called the Peace Corps, and that was the first year that was launched in the United States. And he ended up moving to Africa for several years. And along the way, met my future mother and invited her to move to Kenya with him for 2 years. And while they were there, they were both teachers. So he was teaching law and she was teaching math. And so when it came to my education as a young kid, they were just very open to the world, and my father was also a doodler and a cartoonist, and I think that's what he always wanted to be, but instead he became a lawyer. But he was always drawing and doodling, so a big part of my education was sitting with him and drawing. And so I knew I was always making things and drawing things, and even if it was math or science class, I was the kid in the back doodling and drawing in the margins of the textbooks. And I went to a public school for the first part of my education in Knoxville, Tennessee. And then my mother had gone to a local private school, and all of my aunts and uncles had gone there. So I went to this small, conservative private school in East Tennessee. And fortunately, people were very tolerant of me, especially my art teacher, Miss Dumont. And but I really struggled. I had a really hard time with anything that required a right answer, like going through a formula and then getting the right answer at the end. But really good at things that were open-ended. So, the theater, writing, telling stories, making pictures, being creative, and it was really challenging. I felt really dumb. I didn't feel as smart as other smart kids. And senior year of high school, the local newspaper, those used to exist, they had a local newspaper that invited all the top 5 students from all the local schools to come to a reception and dinner and to get some sort of award. And I was included. So I was one of the top 5 students, and I was sitting at the table with all these kids that were in AP Physics, AP Biology, AP math, AP this, AP that, and I told them all, I said, I don't feel like I belong at this table. But my grades were off the charts in the classes that I was taking, which were things like art history, European history, English, things like that. And they said, we can't do what you do. So there's no way that, I'm sitting across from, let's say, Omar Baldonaro, and he said, there's no way I would get an A plus in art. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. so So that was the first time that I felt like I belonged at the same table. I did, like my father before me, I did not know what I wanted to do, but I definitely wanted to go to art school. And my mother was also she was a painter and very creative. She had a creative business herself and was well known in what we would call her niche internationally. So she had published some books and had a patent under her name, and was an entrepreneur. So she was on Team Peter, and always looking for opportunities and trying to point me directions, even though I was 17-year-old, didn't want to listen to my mom. But she was like, you know what, you should talk to this person, you talk to that person, and they said you could go to the Art Institute of Chicago or an art school, but maybe better for you to go to a university like this one. And it was Washington University in St. Louis. And so that's where I ended up going through a series of, just random events, choosing that, getting accepted, ending up going there, getting a couple of scholarships to be able to afford it, because it's a private university. And it's an art school, it's an old art school for the United States, going back to the early 1900s, within a larger university, but a small university. So it kind of fit all the things I was looking for. And at that time, the art school was based off the French model, which was very much an academy. So you had very deep exposure to the craft of a topic, whether it was sculpture or printmaking or painting. And the professors, they were all very different, but the ethos was, I'm here to teach you the craft of this thing, metalworking, etc. And it's up to you to be creative and do something with that. Other art schools, every place is different, every professor is different. Some were very open, like, hey, whatever you want to do. But this was a lot of rigor involved. So as an example, when I took figure drawing, where you're drawing the human figure, our professor, Barry Shockman, was nationally known as a colossal hard ass, because even that name, Barry Shockman, he was, that's all he did, was study the human figure and the history of drawing. And so when we first came in, he had this chalkboard, and he said, okay, and he was from, I'm going to do his accent, it's terrible, my version of it, but he was from New York. He was a former boxer in the Navy. So he's always moving like this. He's like, all right. And they could smoke in classrooms. So sometimes he'd have 2 cigarettes going because he was really nervous. So he'd light one, he'd put it down, he'd forget about it, light another one. He's like, oh, I got 2. So he was always moving and grooving. But he had this chalkboard, and he said, okay, if you show up, you do everything perfectly, you turn in every assignment on time, you are excellent, you get a C, which is not the top grade. And he said, if you are above and beyond and really excel in the craft of drawing the human figure, you get a C plus. And he wrote that real close to the top of the board. He said, oh, no more room. So his message was, that humans have been doing this for thousands of years, trying to look at, understand, and recreate an image of the human figure. You're not special. So you're here to work, and it was really hard work. So that was up till that point. Art had been a lot of, oh, that's great, you're doing fantastic. Here are a couple of suggestions. But Barry Shockman was like boot camp, and we all complained about it, but I definitely loved it, and that really stuck with me.
I'm kind of wondering, honestly, you're talking about the model of art school you had that was very structured, much more focused on the craft. Now that you've been in the career of being a graphic facilitator for 20 to 30 years, what do you think about that? Would you have preferred a model that was a lot more focused on the creative elements versus just the how do you draw a human figure perfectly?
Well, I definitely had exposure to both. So I've in that model at that time, which was well before you were born, Nick. This was the late '80s. It was a 4-year program, and the first 2 years were called, I think, core, but it's the fundamentals, and it wasn't just drawing; it was painting, it was two-dimensional design. This was all right before computers started to enter the scene. That the core were the foundation elements, and then you chose your major, and you would go into either painting, printmaking, graphic design. I chose illustration because I love stories and images, and I wanted to make things that had an audience. So it wasn't just personal expression. Um, and I read a lot of books, graphic novels, magazines, and loved. That's just what I wanted to do. I wanted to make images that would be published, that would collaborate with different artists and authors and journalists. And I also really respected some journalistic illustrators who would they were the journalists, so they would investigate, let's say, like the industrial meatpacking industry, or some political intrigue or some social injustice, and use illustration, telling stories with pictures, as a way to tell the story or to reveal what they had learned. And so it was, and that I'm trying to answer your question. So that's where it kind of threaded the needle, or brought together both the craft side, doing things well within a tradition, and then the freedom side, which was exploring, a theme or a message or a story. And I have to give credit to Jeff Pike, Professor Jeff Pike. So he, at that time, was the head of the illustration department at Washington University in St. Louis. And he emphasized that he would be giving us assignments, but it was up to us to execute the final product using whatever medium we wanted to. So some illustrators, they made 3-dimensional clay like scenes, almost like stop motion scenes. Others were very painterly, some were very abstract. Didn't matter. And so that's where the freedom came in the collaboration. And I still carry that today. So jump cut to today, I've been working as a graphic recorder or visual facilitator. There are lots of terms that get thrown around, but still making pictures based on people's story, or working with a group that's trying to do something like brainstorming or ideation or developing a new product. On Friday, I'll be participating in the Houston Hackathon, in which there'll be about 200 people bringing different problems that are specific to the city of Houston into the room, and then forming teams to develop a product, service, or solution around that problem. And so I'll be there just as a resource, helping to visualize. It might be the product, it might be the information flow, or how apps and trucks and people and databases all connect. But for me, it's the same thing that I was doing when I was, 19 and started studying illustration, which was trying to understand a story or a system, and then use drawings as a way to understand and communicate that.
I'm curious, how did you discover graphic recording or visual facilitation as something that you could do?
Well, I laid the groundwork with the studying illustration at school. Upon graduation, I was very fortunate. I received a scholarship to travel abroad. This was 1991, and it was when a lot of political changes were happening in Eastern Europe. So before that period, basically from after World War II until the late 80s, most of those countries were under the Soviet influence, the former version of the empire that included Russia. And so I was every day, there was something happening in the news. So I was listening to NPR and hearing about Lech Wałęsa being, this was an electrical worker who was part of the workers' union that formed a workers' movement in Poland that helped to overthrow the authoritarian communist government at the time. And now he was being elected president after being in prison, and the country was under martial law for several years. And so every week there was a new country that was going through some form of systems change, big systems change. And I just knew I wanted to be there. So that was that hunger inside of me to be this kind of investigative journalist illustrator. I just wanted to go and see what was happening and to use my journals and sketchbooks to process that information. So I ended up getting into a sister city program to teach English as a second language in Poland. And so I was working with little kids, I was working with doctors, I was working with high school students, and Nick, I was not qualified to be an English teacher. I was an American who was young and kind of fun, and so I didn't know what I was doing. But they wanted conversational English. So that's sure. At that point, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have a lot of resources, and parents wanted their kids to learn English because it was the language of business. So I did that for a couple of years, and the program that St. Louis connected me to was hosted by the Foundation in Support of Local Democracy. And this was a joint American-Polish institution or foundation. And it was basically helping local municipalities, because this political system had been very top-down, hierarchical. Mm-hmm. So people told me that they're working in an office, and in order to get a package of printing paper, they had to go through Warsaw and have all these things approved in order to buy just a package of paper to put it in a printer. Wow. And so you multiply that times everything. It was a very centralized communication, approval, economy, that sort of thing. Well, then afterwards, kind of everybody was on their own. So every city, every state or county was trying to figure out how to keep the lights on, how to send kids to school, how to attract tourists now, how to rebuild economies, help this thing called entrepreneurship happen, because that wasn't a legal thing before the change in government. So I was just there teaching English, but I was listening to all these people. I would be in these meetings at the Foundation in Support of Local Democracy, and they would have a consultant from, let's say, Sweden or West Germany or Great Britain or Denmark come in to consult about sanitation, shipping, procurement, distribution of goods, trying to set up new markets for things like ice cream from Denmark. Stuff, real simple things like that, but it was starting from scratch, how to build these systems. And I'm just listening and doing my doodles. And then the heads of the foundation looked over and said, "Hey, can we use that? we have a meeting coming up and this guy's coming in and they're going to talk about sanitation. And can we use your drawing to just show them what's going on? So that is the first time I saw that visual facilitation graphic recording was a tool, is a tool for helping people get stuff done. So for me, there was this shift from, trying to create drawings to tell a story to creating a tool with people who are trying to work on complex systems design or systems change. And this visual tool accelerated that work. So that's at the core of all this, is the visual tool helps accelerate the work. It removes friction and time from people understanding either a system or an idea or a product or a service, and deciding what do we do next, right? I didn't know that. So I'm just sitting there drawing. The director said, hey, can we use the drawings? It wasn't until I moved back to the United States, to Chicago, and and I understand your demographic is young people trying to figure out what to do with their lives. I did not know what to do with my life, just like my father did not know what he was going to do with his life after all of his little chapters. So I'm in Chicago working as a temp, making the early stage of PowerPoints for an insurance company, and I felt like a coyote ready to in a trap and just wanted to chew my leg off because I felt so trapped. And I was complaining all the time to my temp agent, who was also my friend. And she said, well, I got this weird job request. I don't know actually what it is, but they mentioned drawing in it, and you seem to draw quite a bit, so go check it out. And it turned out it was working in an innovation center for Ernst & Young. So this was a right now, to say that you work at an innovation center, I think people understand that because they're a lot more popular. But in 1994, 5, it was pretty weird. So this innovation center just had tons of white walls, lots of materials for leading and creating collaborative design events. And this was early in the days of when design thinking was starting to come into vocabulary of different industries. And this particular part of Ernst & Young was focused on basically consulting with large brands like Fortune 50 companies who had purchased SAP to help them with all their procurement, distribution systems. And this is, once again, mid-90s. So the software was super clunky and super janky, and you had to install them with 8 different CDs and have big, thick manuals. And so they had these collaborative design events to understand, well, what are you trying to do, Coca-Cola? Or what are you trying to do, AT&T or Walgreens, whatever big company they were working with. And they had people like me. I was not the first. I was just a lackey, coming in. But they had graphic recorders there who were drawing and diagramming all these different ideas and systems out on the wall to use as a tool to help people communicate and understand complex ideas, move the friction, decide what they're going to do next. So that, my friend, is how I discovered this whole, little career path, and that was 1995. So I've been doing that ever since.
All right. Where'd you go from there after the temp job with Ernst & Young?
Well, that was I was very, very lucky. People were very tolerant because I was in my 20s, so I was doing things that people in their 20s do outside of work and coming in a little tired the next day. And so, but it was a great collaborative team. It was a network and a combination of people who were full-time at Ernst & Young, consultants, MBAs, web designers and technologists, and then this network that was growing. And I happened to join right as they had the first innovation center in Chicago, and they started to build these all around the world. So I was fortunate to be on the team that they would say, hey, Peter, join these 5 other people and you're going to London because we opened a new center, and you're going to teach them just how we do things, not just the drawing part, but how to the back of the house facilitation part. So there's kind of front of the house where there's dude or woman up there who's pointing and gesturing and telling people what to do. But then there's a team in the back that's listening, that's preparing the next set of exercises, that's doing research based on what they said or heard, that is maintaining the environment, printing, publishing, photographing things, creating notes, all these things that the AI note takers are now metabolizing. We had humans that had to go and write stuff down. And so there was the facilitation team, and the people that tended to get it were people like theater kids, people that had worked in restaurants, teachers, former military, anybody who was in a context where they were on a team that had a process, and it's a chaotic environment. So you have to be, there's a level of situational awareness, to borrow a military term. But it's like, Nick, have you ever worked in a restaurant?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay. You have to walk into a room and quickly scan and get a sense of how things are going, right? Is that table waiting too long and getting fidgety? Did these people just come in? Did somebody call out sick? So that means that the team that's there has to cover a lot of different parts of a different job. Is there a big wedding party that's coming in 2 hours? And so you have to flip the whole, so my point is, the people that had a lot of challenges going into this world of real-time collaborative design environments were the ones that needed a lot of clarity and a lot of direction and a lot of status. Because that was another problem, is we'd have this team and we'd be working 12 to 18 hours for these pretty massive events, like 3 days, 100 participants, a lot of things being produced in real time. And we'd get, a young, earnest accountant, maybe somebody who just got their MBA, and the lead, we call them sponsors, so it's the lead accounting team, would say, hey, Chad is going to be on your team. He's just going to observe and, just find stuff to do. And Chad would freak out because he's like, I have an MBA and I'm very important, and I don't want to be bussing tables and cleaning up papers and handing out assignments because I'm important. We'd have to haze Chad and break him in a little bit and teach him this is part of it. Like, if you want to be a leader, this is part of it. You have to understand the system and how it all works. So they wisely began to realize, even if they had, let's say, a new managing director come in who was going to run one of these innovation centers in Mumbai or Munich, Germany, or Sydney, Australia, they had to start at the bottom. So they had to start handing out assignments, bussing tables, doing the, quote, grunt work in order to really appreciate all the work that goes into making the system effective. Because if they just started at the top, front of the room, giving orders and didn't understand how the restaurant worked, use that metaphor, then they would flame out. The team wouldn't respond to them. They would start making demands that were unrealistic or destructive. So I don't even know what your original question was, but this is where I went from, starting to being one of the, and this was only within a couple of years, because I was doing a lot of events, to being one of the coaches and teachers, bringing in new people. And so jump cut to today, that's one of my roles and passions is we have a large international network of facilitators, graphic recorders. They're called solution designers. So people who work with a client to figure out what are you trying to do, and then help them design events and a process for bringing people together to design something pretty complex that involves a lot of stakeholders. So the solution designer feels invisible because they are not front of the room. They're not somebody like me that's up there drawing or facilitating, but they're really essential because they're like the showrunner or the stage manager of a movie or a play. They're figuring out all the pieces that need to fit together and who needs to be on the team. So anyway, there's this network around the world that has been a part of these different collaborative innovation centers for Ernst & Young, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, all kind of the big consulting firms, and then smaller companies that are more boutique and may work with tribal communities or municipal governments, or pick your domain, but applying the same collaborative design process to solve problems and designing solutions in those domains. So we have this network around the world, and I and some other of my colleagues as volunteers, we help manage the learning community and host conversations to look at different aspects and models and philosophies around making it a healthy system for people to work together.
Sure.
And there you go. Plus, I had some kids, I got a dog, a whole bunch of other stuff.
Okay. Very nice. So I'm wondering now, a little bit as well before and kind of around your stint with EY, and then also now into currently, you mentioned at the beginning, your company, Alphachimp. How did that start?
Another short question with a long answer, but I've already planted the seeds. So when I was in Poland, that's where I was teaching English, and I was gallivanting around, hitchhiking all around Eastern Europe into the former Soviet Union, Crimea, all that area. I randomly got a job at the first nationwide radio station in Poland, RMF FM, and they basically wanted some goofy Americans to host a show and be goofy Americans. And the guy I asked to be my partner was not a goofy American. John Finns, very serious, very well-educated man, spoke 3 languages. He wanted it to be more of a NPR, fresh air kind of show. And the managers of the radio station were like, no, we just want you to be stupid Americans. So I was perfect for that. And so we would make up little radio plays in Polish and English, like Star Wars, but in bad Polish American mashup slang. That was called monkey business. So when I was in Chicago and I was working in Ernst & Young, and there was a point where I was like, you know what, I think I want to start my own thing. I got a commission to do a poster for a big conference, and they were going to print 10,000 copies. And I was like, this is my opportunity to put my name and a URL. So the URL existed before the business. And we were this was once again back in the early 90s. We were back there trying to find a .com name. In the 1990s, the internet was pretty much sports, stocks, and pornography. So every URL that I typed in, it was like a porn name. So monkey business, porn site. I was like, well, my nickname is Sneaky Pete, sneakypete.com. And so we were just brainstorming, and my friend Andrew Park, who is an amazing artist and the creator of the RSA Animates, he's from England. We had studied in Poland together, and he was visiting in Chicago, and he's actually the one that thought up Alphachimp. So Alphachimp.com existed before the company Alphachimp, but I wanted a name that could lean any direction and be anything. So, and I did not want to be mistaken for somebody who actually knew how to do stuff. So I didn't want to be, Durand Consultants or something like that. In fact, at a certain point, we had a bunch of old guys that we wrangled into being our advisors, and they said, "You got to change your name. It sounds too silly." I was like, "Well, what about Google and Yahoo? Those are ridiculous names. Should we call it Durand Consulting?" They're like, "That sounds great." It's like, I think Durand's already taken. Alphachimp.com started that way. It started out as a poster, URL on a poster, but has been around since 1998 and has stayed in that zone. Actually, in this interview, I figured out from rambling to you, it all goes back to that first class in illustration. It's just like, it's what I want to do. Work with people, understand their story, make an image that helps communicate it. And so it's been a fun ride.
All right, that's awesome, and I'm really happy that you kind of connected it, tied it back a little bit, and that you're kind of you're gaining things from this as well, almost. I think that's really nice. So that's great.
Can I add something else? And this is
of
advice for young people. So I have a 21-year-old who's a senior in college and university. And I still wake up every day and I feel like I'm 21 years old and things are just getting started and I don't know actually what I'm doing in my life. And the advice that I gave her, based on just my experience and my father's experience as well, is everybody's going to ask you, "What do you want to do after school?" You don't have to tell them because you don't know what you're going to do after school. And you don't have to have an answer because that's not the point. For me, the point of education is not to become a specialized person in an industry, especially now. The industries are all disrupted. It's to be an interesting person and to be a person who's interested in a lot of different things and can pursue them even when the path is not clear. And then to have a lot of friends who do a lot of different things that you could call on to bring in for advice or to commiserate or to hear how they're solving their problem. Like, that's the best thing about going to school and being young, is to explore and to explore in parallel with others who are exploring. So one of the pieces of advice I gave my daughter when she was going off, she originally was going to study engineering, and the first day of orientation in the engineering school, she just kind of looked around and she's like, "I don't really think I'm an engineer." And she realized she had not invested. This is my interpretation. She may have a different way that she would describe her experience, but from my perspective, she had the thought of being an engineer, but she wasn't deeply experienced in robotics, programming, building rockets, engineering type stuff as a kid. And she was in the room with all those kids who they already had the 10,000 hours of being really interested in deep making and designing of hardwired things. So she went across the street to the science school and is majoring in biology, ended up spending 2 summers in the jungles of the Caribbean looking for lizards as a paid researcher, trying to find these creatures that don't want to be found and doing the grunt work of science, similar to, I was describing the grunt work of the collaborative design.
Yeah.
Grunt work of science is pretty gnarly. You got to pack everything in. You got to live in a tent. You got to grid off a section of jungle and then go and find living animals that don't want to be caught. You got to do it safely for them, for you. So she didn't. That wasn't ever on the to-do list. It just like that's where she ended up going in her career. So and she has lots of friends, and you do too. We're doing a lot of different things. And that's the best is like hearing what people are doing and what twists and turns there are coming up on their path. Uh, where were the points where they thought this was the direction and then a door closes or they get burned out? They're like, I don't think I want to be an engineer, or a doctor or computer programmer or pick your topic. And then they have to pivot and jump off a cliff into uncertainty. That is the hero's adventure. Those are the moments where you're like entering into unfamiliar territory.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. And I mean, I as well am at that point where I'm a junior in engineering, so that resonates with me a lot as well, and I know that will resonate with a lot of our listeners. So thank you for that. Okay. So my next question for you, I'm wondering about your process of growing Alphachimp into what it is today. It started with a URL. I'm assuming it's not just a URL at this point.
Sometimes
and I
it
want
is.
to know. And I'm curious, what were some of the trials and tribulations of kind of getting your own thing off of the ground, and what were some of the key steps along the way?
Well, so Alphachimp has gone through many. I'm going to borrow a term from biology, morphologies, which means how
Okay.
something looks. So it's I started as an independent, working with friends. Today I'm an independent, working with friends, on different collaborations and projects. In between that, have gone through a lot of different stages. So at one point, got married to my girlfriend, who was one of my friends working in the company. And so we ran the company together as a partnership for 12 years. In that phase, it would rise and fall. So sometimes we'd have employees, sometimes we'd have to lay employees off. We'd have a kick-ass space location in one city, and then something happened, or we made a decision, we moved to another city, or we'd scale up too fast, or or we'd outgrow a space. We'd say, okay, we're going to go small again. We get small again, and suddenly we'd have a lot of projects, and we're bringing in interns and employees and virtual assistants, and then it gets really big. So it's gone through a lot of morphologies, and probably at the largest, and I put that in air quotes, the largest, it was 11 full-time people,
Wow.
which
Okay.
is for small businesses, that's one of those inflection points. I think 12 is one of the scientific, you're the engineer, like when you have a network and when you hit 12, something happens, there's a step change in the system. So at that 11, 12 mark, for me as the lead project deliverer, as the lead partner with my wife at the time, and as the business person who had never gone to business school, it was a lot. And then we had younger employees, they had young families, they were having babies, feeling of responsibility. And then a lot of blurring of work relationships and friendships.
Mm.
There was a time where things needed to change financially, but I didn't want to fire anybody because I care about them
Yep.
and I enjoy them and I care about their spouses and their kids, and we're all kind of one big mosh pit of friends and family. So there was that stage, that kind of messy middle stage. And then unfortunately, the marriage did not survive, not because of the business, just because of us. Two people get married, two people decide not to get married. So the marriage ended, and there were geographic changes involved. But also in that middle part, I formed a partnership with a friend, and they were in another country. I was in the United States, and we started to scale up the the whiteboard video business. The hand comes in, there's a voiceover, they start writing.
Yeah.
It was all done
Yeah.
like this. There's a camera and lights and trying to draw something in slow motion, storyboarding everything out. So that credit goes to Andrew Park. He's the guy that he named Alphachimp, and then he's the pioneer of that whole business. So he brought me in to try to grow the U.S. business, which we did. So there was a partnership just focused on that for a good solid year. And then we decided, this isn't working. Just two different countries trying to figure out who's doing what and where the money's going and what people are involved. But we continued making those films as well, the Whiteboard Explainers, full time for another couple of years, not doing graphic recording. So within Alphachimp, the business focus and product services shifted. And then for what grew out of that is my true love is teaching, is working with people and seeing the lights coming on and excitement. And so for several years, I was just teaching online and teaching workshops in person. So all of this to say, the business was always Alphachimp from that first URL to today, but the focus of activities has shifted over time. Mm-hmm. And also right now we're in a huge period of excitement and disruption with AI. I really wish that AI would do my laundry and my dishes, but instead it's helping people generate images, right? And now video with VO3. Like, it's really incredible. You can just type in a couple of prompts, you get a script, and then you get a full three-dimensional video. So all of that is really disrupting the business model for creatives that are focused on telling stories with pictures. So we being my friends, we're all trying to figure out, well, what's our role now? We're not going to give up, because people still need help telling stories visually. There are all these new tools that enable people to make things quickly. And there's a lot of, not so good stuff out there. But this has been the history of technology and art and production and printing and animation forever. As new technologies come in, there's a very disruptive period, and then people figure out, well, how do we use this disruption in a positive way? And so I personally and my friends, we're all trying to figure out how to ride this next wave and still do what we like to do.
Yeah. Do you have any idea of what that's going to look like yet? Or any thoughts? I know it's a heavy question.
I wake up every morning, it's like, what am I doing today? How's it going to go? I don't know. Since I mentioned I was born in Kenya, I did not grow up there. When I was an infant, we moved back to the United States, but I've been back to East Africa several times. And what I noticed in a place like Kenya is you have 10,000 years of human tools all stacked up together. So in one day, you can drive this direction and you'll see like a Maasai sheep herder kid who's 8 years old, and he's just out in the desert basically with a couple of goats or sheep. He's got a stick and a piece of cloth, and that's it. And his older brother or dad may walk by, and he's got a stick or a spear, he's got a piece of cloth, he's got an Apple Watch on. So it's just like, it is 10,000 years of technology all stacked together, and this is the top of the stack now. So we've got AI, and AI is such a broad field. I mean, you are probably living in this and creating things right now. It's two letters that means like a gabillion different technologies that are all being invented right now. And that's on top of everything else. So why did I say that? I'm still being asked by people, hey, can you show up at our meeting and just, draw on paper while we talk, which is a very old way of working. And for them, it's very useful. Like, that's it. Now we can take that and make decisions. So there's still the need for humans to work with humans, and there's all this automation, machine learning, algorithms, prompt inspired three-dimensional videos of the Sasquatch vlog, um, which is one of the rabbit holes maybe you shouldn't go down, but I've gone down on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah, it's how to use that well, because there's still the design process of what are we trying to do and who are we trying to do it for, and what is the ecosystem or the economic environment in which that product or service is going to, try to survive. And those are hard questions for everybody to answer right now.
Yeah. All right.
And then the fourth question is, how do we pay for it?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mind if I pivot to something a little away from AI? All right. I'm curious. So you have been working as well as an adjunct law professor at Northwestern. I am very, very curious what you do and how you got that and why.
Well, I'm embarrassed on how I got it, but all the best
Don't be.
things in life happen when you least expect it. So I was creating a very large mural in Orlando, Florida, at a giant conference center for the Health Information and Technology Conference. So these are all the engineers in the healthcare world that are working with data, and I'm making this big mural. And a woman walked up, asked me what I was doing, chit chat, chit chat. I was in Chicago at the time. She was in Chicago, and she said, I have this incubator, business incubator. And this is a good lesson. So it's not about what happened to me, it's what could happen to you. So, business incubator, and we have a lunch and learn every Thursday. Would you be interested in maybe talking for 30 minutes? I was like, all right. It's free, got a free lunch. So I showed up. I talked about visual learning, graphic recording. I had worked in healthcare for quite a while. And so just, spoke. And there was somebody there whose eyes lit up and said, the head of our program would love this, Leslie. And so he connected me with Leslie Oster, who is the head of the Masters of Science in Law program at the Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. And this is a 1-year graduate program, at the end of which you don't go and practice law. It's not a JD, but it is for, let's say, somebody like you or your peers who maybe they are in engineering or product design. They realize I'm going to be moving into life sciences and I need to get smart about the FDA approval process, contract law, working with patients, anything that affects that middle part of business, science, and law, because it was a missing piece of knowledge and qualification. So that's why they created the program. So my role, and after talking with Leslie a couple of times, she said, "Yeah, we'll come in and teach a course." So I'm a professor, but I have to diminish my professorship down to this bottom line because some of my peers there they are law professors, so they have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of hours in the study of law. I'm teaching the same thing I've been doing since that age of 19 in the first illustration class, how to understand complex systems, what are some different visual tools to use to communicate, how to tell stories, and how to do that well for your audience. So I teach a class once a year, and it's basically that. It's visual storytelling for systems change. Yep, that's it.
All right.
And
All right.
and I have major imposter syndrome every time I enter that venerable building.
I wonder if those law professors, kind of like the story you were talking about when you were invited for that local newspaper and the people around you were saying, man, I could never do what you're doing. I wonder if they feel the same way, those law professors.
That's thank. I had never thought about that, but that is a theme, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
but
Because
yeah,
I,
and it's and it go. I start off my presentation every year with a picture like this of my father, who's drawing at a chalkboard in Malawi in 1965 as he is teaching law in a school in Malawi. So, I try to tie it back, and I try to acknowledge my ancestors and my teachers as well. It's like, I didn't invent any of this. I'm just a practitioner, and I pick this up from all these different places. And when I teach, I tell them, I'm going to dump out so much stuff. It's going to be like a big floor covered with Lego pieces, and it's up to you to build something awesome, but
all right. So I want to go back to the advice portion of this. Normally I like to save it to the end, but I love how you did it, where we threw it right in the middle. So I want to ask if you have some advice for someone who's looking to start an independent firm, similar to what you did, whether it's creative or not, just doing their own thing.
well, get ready. That's what I would say. From what I've seen, there are different constitutions, like internal constitutions. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My parents ran their own small construction firm. My father was a partner in a small law firm. My grandfather had a cement business, and I ran as far away as I could from that, saying I never want to go into business, and I definitely didn't want to go into law. And here I am running my own business and teaching in a law firm. So there's something that's internal, and a lot of that is. So this is my advice. If you feel that tension where you're just like, this thing needs to get made and nobody's making it and the people I'm working for don't get it, that's a signal. You may be kind of built to be an entrepreneur. The second thing is it's so much easier now. It's not easier in terms of making it successful or money, but in terms of tools, access to information, there's so many incubators and co-working spaces and mentor programs. So to find advice is, I think, a lot easier. The flip side of that is the volume of advice. So, you can receive all the advice in the world. In the end, if you are the entrepreneur or a partner in a startup, you and your team are the ones that still have to make a decision on how to go forward. And then the third thing is, and this is something my mother always said. So before I went off to college, we were eating at a chicken restaurant, and we were talking about the dangers of hardcore drugs. And my mother got very intense, and I thought she was going to say, I was ready for the lectures, like, don't do drugs. But she said, whatever happens, ever you do, get a strong business background, because she was running a business and having all those problems. And I fell out of my chair laughing. I was like, I'm never going to start a business. I'm going to art school. I really wish I'd gotten a little more business background. Fortunately, my mother, having run her own company for a while, she's been an advisor, and I have other friends. So find your peer group that is not invested in what you're doing, so you can find your blind spots. That's where I'm going with this. Is a lot of times, like in engineering, software development, product development, creative services, we love to do the thing, but we have all these blind spots about how do you actually hire people? What is the law around what you're actually doing? What is a contract, and what does it mean? So there's all this stuff that we just didn't learn because we haven't learned it yet, and we're focused on the let's say the technical or the craft side of the thing that we want to build. So that's where having peers and let's call them older mentors who have lived through some stuff. I think even the older mentors, they lived through stuff in their era, which is different from the era today that you're in. So that's the hard thing is it's still up to you. You're still going to be the person making a good or bad decision, and you really don't know if it's going to be a good or bad decision till a little later. The final thing I'll throw out there that I learned from hanging around AWS, Amazon Web Services, is they have a couple of, or they have a lot of internal mythology and models and sayings that they share among their teams. And one of them is, which kind of door is it? So there's a door, you have a choice, are you going to get married? Are you going to go into partnership with this person? Are you going to drop out of school and start your business? And that's a door. So you're going to go through this door and you ask yourself, what kind of door is this? Is it a two-way door? Like if I make this decision, let's say to drop out of school and start a tech startup, can I go back to school? Can I say, well, that didn't work and reverse? Or is it a one-way thing? Like, after I do this, I just got to keep going until I find the next door or the next opportunity. Because some things, most things in life are two-way. You can try it, didn't work, okay. Maybe you lost time, you lost some money, maybe you lost a friendship or relationship. You're still alive. You're still alive. You can, reboot. But some things may be a one-way door, where after which you got to keep going.
All right.
Is that helpful?
Sure. It's very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you. And I have one more question for you as well. What about advice for someone who wants to start a creative career?
Well, so my daughter, who was going to engineering school, went to biology, is majoring in biology. Now her first job is as an illustrator. And she has a mother and a father who both have done this for their whole careers. So, we can't tell her she can't do this. And she's started doing that. She's still in school, but she's getting paid to do that. So we are humans and we are naturally creative. So that's not going to go away. But creative business, two different things. So for creative business, go for it. If you want to start a business, but know what business means and what does business mean today, and run things as cheaply as possible. So one of the and right after this, I'm talking to a friend of mine that we met in a business boot camp for creatives through Chris Doe. Is we acknowledge that here's a trap a lot of creatives fall into. They get their first clients, they get a little bit of money, they get busy, and I need to hire somebody. They hire somebody either part-time, virtually, in person, and they're like, I need a cool space. So then they sign a lease on that loft space, and then they have to buy a cool chair, and then they have to buy a cool desk, and then a cool desk setup, and then some lighting, and then some fancy plants. So there's like a metabolism that starts to grow, especially in the design and creative space, where there's an identity around space and the things that signal this is a creative business. And that metabolism can become very expensive. So that's, and sometimes you need it. So if you want to attract other creatives, and you want them to show up in your space, they're going to have expectations. But make those choices wisely so that you don't create an overhead, the metabolism. Like if it's your body, you need 6,000 calories a day, but you can only eat 2,000 calories a day. There's going to be a differential. So that's the business part of it, is just like, if you're going to be creating something, you're creating it for somebody who's going to pay for it. And when they pay you, do you have enough left at the end of the month after you've paid for the cool space and the cool people and the cool Aeron chairs? Or are you going into debt? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as any other business, is understanding the metabolism of the business and what's required and then trying to keep things as flexible as possible. So, like working in a co-working, and I feel like things that I'm saying are very well known today. They weren't as available as a decade ago or 2 decades ago. But working virtually is no big deal now. Working co-working spaces, no big deal now. So keep it light and smooth and easy, so that you can concentrate on the creative business or the creative part, because the creative technology tools, ways of getting things done, there's a steep on ramp now, and it's all being disrupted. So you need to keep very fast and flexible, and not have the business part take up so much of your bandwidth and your brain power and your pocketbook.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing that. This has been an incredible conversation. I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of fun. So thank you very much for joining me today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share or promote or anything like that? Final piece of advice, plug your business, anything before we go?
Well, if you want to make something creative, hire a creative. There you go. Don't just be lazy with ChatGPT. I'm tired of seeing all that slop out there.
It's terrible.
The other thing is, for you and for all young entrepreneurs out there, is take care of your health. Keep moving physically, keep connected with friends. If you're having trouble now, the troubles are not going to go away unless you take care of them. So take care of them with other people. That's my advice. Like, find good people that you can talk to.
Thank you, Peter. Like I said, this has been a lot of fun. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Nick.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any thoughts, feedback, or just want to say hi, shoot me an email at nick@reroutedpod.com. If you like the show, leave a review, give us a follow, and subscribe. You can find links to our website and socials in the description below. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.